Even though clerics are religious in nature, there are still some deities that rule over the more dark, sinister domains, such as death. Let's talk about that. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. Now today we're talking about a divine domain that is commonly looked at as evil. But before we get into that, I just want to point out there are plenty of people in the world who are fascinated by death, who are not evil. And I think it has just as much potential for a cleric of a death god or a death deity to be good as there is potential for them to be evil. So let's not judge a book by their cover or by their deity. Let's judge a book by their acts and what they do with their mace. As always, dealing with these divine domains, I want to know your thoughts in the comments below so I can kind of rank them and figure out which one is the best. I want to know who is the best divine domain out there. The divine domain of death deals with, essentially, in a nutshell, in a one word, necromancy. It has to do a lot with the cause of death and the energies that can bring the undead back. It's necromancy. These are necromancy clerics in a nutshell. These deities also might be closely connected to murder, or the idea of murder, as they are generally evil deities. They are generally kind of a darker or misunderstood deity. That's what I'm going to call them. They're just misunderstood. They're not evil. Some well-known deities in the D&D pantheon are Chemosh, Weejoss, and Baal. That's how I pronounce it. Some others call it Behal. I think that sounds weird. Clerics of the death deities will be basically dealing with that. They're going to lean in towards necromancy quite a bit, and death, and kind of this obsession with what comes after. So let's get into these death domain spells. At level 1 you have False Life and you have Ray of Sickness, neither of which are part of the cleric spell list normally. False Life is a great boost of HP, giving 1d4 plus 4 temporary HP when you use it. At level 3 you have the spells Blindness/Deafness and Ray of Enfeeblement. Ray of Enfeeblement is not normally on the cleric spell list, but as a death domain, of course, you're gonna get that one probably. And Blindness/Deafness sounds, or is what it sounds like. You impose deafness or blindness on an enemy. At level 5 you get Animate Dead and Vampiric Touch. Vampiric Touch is really good for both dealing damage and healing at the same time. As you suck the life force out of an enemy, you can use it on yourself. It's just a great way to just be like, I need a couple HP real quick. At level 7 you get Blight and Death Ward. Death Ward will keep something alive. Blight will kill them very quickly because it is the high damage dealer. Baseline damage from Blight is 8d8 damage, and as you cast it at higher levels, of course, the damage goes up. So that, I think, is a big powerhouse for a damage-dealing Death Cleric right there. At level 9, you get the Anti-Life Shell and Cloud Kill. Neither of them are on the Cleric's list because they both sound pretty sinister, but Cloud Kill is basically the impressive poison cloud effect that can deal a lot of damage to a large area all at once. So you can see those spells, most of them you'll see kind of the tendency to lean towards the dark, the necromancy, the death, the vampiric touch. Those kind of things are much more in the death domain wheelhouse. Now let's look at some of the features you get as a death domain cleric. Right away at level 1 you gain extra proficiencies in martial weapons. So this is the class where you would want to take a warhammer over the mace, and you have that opportunity right away. Also at level 1 you get the feature called Reaper. Now Reaper lets you pick a necromancy spell off of any other spell list. In addition to that, if that spell normally can only target one person, you can target 2 people with that spell. At level 2 you get your extra channel divinity ability. At this one it is called Touch of Death. It sounds cooler than it actually is. What it does is you add extra necrotic damage onto a melee attack that you deal, and that damage is 5 plus 2 times your cleric level. So at level 3 you would deal an extra 11 necrotic damage. At higher levels, when you hit level 10, 15, 20 for example, at level 20 2 times your cleric level is 40, plus 5 you're dealing 45 extra damage on a melee attack, just from being a death cleric. This one doesn't have an extra boost at higher levels, but by the nature of its ability and the number and the math that goes involved, you're going to be leveling up consistently anyways. At level 6, the feature is called Inescapable Destruction, and this basically shows how great it is to lean into the necrotic damage and deal it. Essentially what you get is whenever you deal necrotic damage to an enemy, it ignores any resistance to necrotic damage. So, if you have an enemy that is resistant to necrotic damage, and you hurt them, you ignore that resistance and deal the full amount of damage. This is really good if you're going to lean into that and really, ham up how much damage you're going to be doing, such as Blight, I believe does necrotic damage. It's going to deal a lot, even if they are resistant to it. At level 8, you get the ability Divine Strike, which sounds like an ability to deal radiant damage that other clerics might get, but in this case, because you're death, you can deal extra necrotic damage with a melee attack. Essentially, when you land a hit with a melee attack, you're able to deal an extra 1d8 necrotic damage with that attack, and that 1d8 turns into 2d8 at level 14. At level 17, your powerful ability is called the Improved Reaper. I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I think it could be better, but let's break it down a little bit. Essentially, this improves on the original level 1 Reaper ability, except you don't get extra spells from it. What it does do is any necromancy spell that is level 5 or lower, if it only targets one creature, can now target 2 all the time. The original Reaper only applied to the spells that you picked with original Reaper. This one applies to all necromancy spells across the board as long as they're spell level 5 or lower. The downside of this is if you're in a game that's dealing with material components, and it's very common with 5th level spells to be dealing with those, you're going to be having to spend extra material components per target. Essentially, it doubles the amount. So yes, you can target 2 creatures, but you also have to spend the extra material components to cast the spell at those creatures. So while it is neat, I don't think this is the most powerful Divine Domain ability that you can probably get as a cleric. I think it might fall short a little bit. That's my personal opinion, but that's just my opinion, and you know what they say about those. When playing the Death Domain Cleric, I think it's important that you talk to your Dungeon Master and figure out how your character is going to work. Other Dungeon Masters may not appreciate that, so it's good to open that communication with your Dungeon Master right away if you're thinking about playing a Death Domain. That being said, in terms of feats, I think Spell Sniper is again really useful for this one, because you can just reach out and touch someone from a long ways away, increasing your ranged attack of your spells. I also think the Resilient feat might be very handy, and I hadn't even seen this one beforehand, and I would probably suggest this for everyone, is just take the Resilient feat. So what the Resilient feat does is you get to pick an ability score to increase by 1, first off, but then it also gives you proficiency in saving throws with that ability. So with a cleric, your normal saving throws are wisdom and charisma. You could take this, add on to your constitution or your dexterity, and help make yourself a little more survivable in some situations, because there are a lot of spells that deal with constitution saving throws and dexterity saving throws. This would give you that extra chance to succeed, and I think that's really useful. I would go back to all my videos and put that on the list and say take Resilient if you can, because it's pretty useful. Free saving throw proficiency? Hell yeah. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this video about the Death Cleric. Leave a comment below, let me know what you think of it, and as always, I've been Richard. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see on the channel, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. You can also click over here to see more videos in this playlist, or over here to see what YouTube suggests you watch from my channel.